Berlin, Germany, 1938. A young boy is woken up by the sound of a crack. Towering shadows burst into the room. They grabbed the boy, Joseph, and threw him to the ground, along with the rest of his family. Joseph tried desperately to comfort his little sister, but her cries wouldn't stop. They watched as the men destroyed their home. Lamps smashed, pictures ripped from the wall. Moonlight glanced over one of the men's arms, revealing a horrifying sight. The swastika, surrounded in a coat of red. The men demand Joseph's father to be arrested for practicing law in Germany. Jews were not allowed to practice any sort of law in this time. The men tear the father away from his family. They were not the only Jews attacked that night. That night, the night that went down in infamy, known only as Kristallnacht. This was the last straw for Joseph and his family. Sometime later, they packed their only belongings and headed to a boat. The boat that should spare the family from the horrors about to take place. Its destination, Cuba. Fast forward, Havana, Cuba, 1994. Fidel Castro resides in office, a communist dictatorship. With the fall of the Soviet Union, Cuba was left empty-handed. The fields dried up. Most Cubans were unemployed, and food was hard to come by. Even the zoo had been raided. The animals, eaten. In the midst of this, a young girl, Isabel, and her family are struggling to survive. Her father had tried to escape Cuba many months ago and had been thrown in jail for his actions. It had been a normal day that day. Isabel was playing her trumpet for spare change in the street. All of a sudden, a gunshot rang out, and the world went crazy. Glass shattered, smoke rose from the apartment buildings next to her. Chants of freedom, freedom rang out above the noise. She glanced through the crowd. Then she saw him, her father. She called his name, but he ignored her. She watched as he threw bottles at the line of policemen. In an unfortunate turn of events, the policeman noticed her father. Getting noticed was one of the worst things that could happen in Cuba. Even worse, since her father had already committed a crime, he would be thrown in jail for a very long time. They had to leave Cuba, soon. By some streak of luck, Fidel Castro himself declared that Cubans were legally allowed to leave Cuba. The beach is crowded with many Cubans all trying to escape the regime. Isabel and her family boarded their makeshift motorboat and set a course for the southern tip of Florida. Freedom. Fast forward, Aleppo, Syria, 2015. Aleppo was in the midst of a civil war, government versus anti-government. The Syrians had pointed their guns and tanks against their own people, and Muhammad just happened to be caught in the middle of it. Random death from a fighter jet missile or a soldier's rocket launcher could come at any moment. That day was just like any other day for Muhammad and his family. Muhammad and his brother, Walid, had their eyes focused on the TV with a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon that had been dubbed into Syrian Arabic on the screen. All of a sudden, a roar like a hot wind sounded outside. By now, they all knew it was coming. They dove under the table as fast as they could. A deep, resounding noise shook them and left them with a high-pitched ringing. The walls of their apartment collapsed, and pieces of concrete and glass stuck in Muhammad's skin like splinters. Muhammad struggled to breathe and gasped for air. His head was wet with blood. When he came to, Muhammad searched for his family in the rubble of what was just his home. His family reunited, and they all thought the same thing. They had to leave Syria immediately. They packed into the car with all their belongings in a single backpack and began to drive, leaving everything they once knew behind. Refugee by Gratz tells the story of these three families and their struggle to escape from the horrors in their home countries. The novel is both engaging and important as these issues still affect us in modern times. What fate does each family meet? Find out yourself, and I'm sure you'll be surprised.